I called a plumber on a Tuesday morning because the pipe under the kitchen sink had been dripping for 3 weeks and I kept putting it off the way retired men do when there's no deadline and no one left to impress. My wife Sandra was in Savannah visiting her sister. She'd be gone 4 days. I figured I'd get the sink fixed, eat whatever I wanted for dinner, and watch baseball without someone asking me to turn it down. That was the plan. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher, and I thought, by now, I understood how the world worked. I thought I knew the difference between a surprise and a shock. I didn't know anything. The plumber's name was Dale. He was maybe 40, stocky, wore a gray company shirt with his name stitched in red over the pocket. He came in, looked under the sink, nodded the way plumbers do when they've already decided what's wrong before you finish explaining. He asked if he could check the water shutoff in the utility room downstairs. I told him to go ahead, pointed him to the basement door, went back to my coffee. I was standing at the kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog pace the fence line when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Dale. He was in my basement, and he had texted me instead of walking upstairs. That alone told me something was wrong. "Sir, I need you to come down here. There's something behind your shelving unit you need to see. I don't want to touch anything until you do." I read it twice. I set my coffee mug in the sink. I walked to the basement door and went down. Dale was standing in the back corner of the utility room, the one with the metal shelving unit I'd built myself about 12 years ago. It ran floor to ceiling, held paint cans, holiday decorations, old tools, a broken dehumidifier I always meant to repair. He wasn't looking at the shelves. He was looking at the wall behind them, or rather, at what the wall had been hiding. Someone had moved the shelving unit. Not all the way, just enough. Just enough to show a door, not a closet door, not a utility access panel, a real door. Wooden frame, hollow core, painted the same flat gray as the concrete wall around it, so that unless you were standing at exactly this angle, with exactly this light, you would never know it existed. It had a slide bolt on the outside, engaged. Locked from out here, which meant whatever was on the other side couldn't open it from in there. I said, "That's not possible." Dale said, "I haven't touched the bolt. I didn't want to touch anything until you came down." I stood there. I'd lived in that house for 17 years. I had built those shelves myself. Saturday afternoon, 2 trips to the hardware store, Sandra handing me screws and telling me I was measuring wrong. And I had never, not once, noticed that the wall behind them wasn't solid. I asked Dale to give me a moment. He went upstairs. I stood in front of that door for a long time, long enough to understand that whatever was behind it had not appeared recently, long enough to understand that someone had put it there deliberately, and someone had been maintaining it, and I was the only person in this house who hadn't known it existed. I called 911. I want you to hear this clearly, friends, because I know how it sounds. I want you to understand that I am 63 years old. I have never been arrested. I coached junior varsity track for 11 years. I volunteered at the county food pantry every Thanksgiving for a decade, and I called the police myself. Because that's what an innocent man does. You call the police. You don't touch anything. You go upstairs, you sit at your kitchen table, and you wait. 2 officers arrived in 7 minutes. I walked them down. One of them, the younger one, slid the bolt back and opened the door. The room was approximately 10 feet by 8 feet. There was a cot, a camping lantern, turned off, a small plastic storage bin with a lock on it. And on the wall, written in black marker, were 7 digits that I recognized after a moment as a phone number. The room was empty. No one was inside, but someone had been. Recently, the cot had an indentation in the pillow. The lantern was warm when the officer touched it briefly before pulling his hand away. Someone had been in that room within the last several hours. The older officer turned to look at me. I said, "I built those shelves 12 years ago. I have never opened that door. I did not know that door existed." He nodded. His face told me nothing. They called it in. Within 45 minutes, my house had 4 more officers in it, a detective named Marsh and a forensic technician I never got the name of. Marsh was a woman in her late 40s, short hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She was polite. She was thorough. She asked me the same questions 4 different times in 4 different ways, and I understood what she was doing, and I answered every single one of them the same way every single time, because the truth doesn't change depending on how you ask it. She asked if the house had been on the market before I purchased it. I said no. We were the second owners. Bought it from a couple named Whitfield who had built it in 1987. She asked if anyone else had a key. I said Sandra had a key, and we kept a spare in a lockbox on the side of the house. She asked for the combination. I gave it to her. Then she asked me a question that changed everything. She asked if I was familiar with the name Donna Farrell. I told her no. She showed me a photograph on her phone. A woman, mid-50s, dark hair gone partly gray, a face I didn't recognize. I told her I didn't know her. Marsh put the phone away. She said Donna Farrell had been reported missing by her adult daughter 11 days ago. She said Donna's last known location, according to a witness, was in the vicinity of my neighborhood. And she said that a storage unit registered in my name at a facility on Route 9 had shown activity on its access log 3 times in the past 2 weeks. I told her I didn't own a storage unit. She looked at me the way people look at you when they think you are lying and trying to decide how much trouble you're going to be. I said it again. I do not own a storage unit. I have never rented a storage unit. Check the rental agreement. Check the signature. She told me they would. I sat in my own kitchen for 4 hours while they worked in my basement. Dale, the plumber, left his card on the counter and slipped out sometime around noon. I made myself a sandwich I couldn't eat. I called Sandra. No answer. I texted her. No response for 22 minutes, which was unusual for her. And then she sent back a single line. Everything okay? I told her the police were at the house. She called immediately, voice tight, asking what had happened. I told her they'd found a hidden room in the basement. There was a long pause. Then she said, "A hidden room? What do you mean?" "A hidden room." And I told her what Dale had found, and what it looked like, and what the detective had said about Donna Farrell. Another pause. Then she said, "Oh my God, Martin, that's terrifying." Her voice was the voice of my wife of 19 years. Warm, concerned, slightly breathless. It was a performance. I know that now. I did not know it then. Marsh came back upstairs in the early afternoon. She told me they had lifted prints from the room and from the exterior of the door. She told me they had photographed everything. She told me she would need me to come in the following morning to give a formal statement. She was still polite. She was still thorough. She was treating me like a suspect who didn't know yet that he was a suspect. After they left, I went back down to the basement alone. I stood in front of the open door, and I looked at the room for a long time. The shelving unit was still pulled aside. The bolt was still drawn back. I looked at my hands. These are the hands that built those shelves. These are the hands that graded 31 years of history papers. These are the hands that held my daughter Emma at the hospital when she was 20 minutes old. Someone had built a room behind my shelves. Someone had put a woman in it. Someone had pointed the evidence at me. I am 63 years old, and I don't rattle easily anymore. But I rattled then. I went upstairs. I sat at my desk, and I started thinking like the history teacher I am, because history has taught me one thing above everything else. When something looks like a conspiracy, you start with who benefits. Sandra was in Savannah. She had suggested the trip 2 months ago. Her sister Carol lived there, and they visited once or twice a year, nothing unusual. But she had suggested it specifically for this week. She had mentioned 3 or 4 times that I should call someone about the kitchen sink leak. She had, about 6 weeks ago, asked me what the combination was to the key lockbox on the side of the house. I had told her I didn't know, we never used it. She had said, never mind, she'd figure it out. I had not thought about that conversation again until now. I went through our bank statements online. I am careful with money the way retired teachers are careful with money because we have to be. I knew our accounts. I knew what the numbers were supposed to look like. The numbers were not what they were supposed to look like. I'm not talking about the kind of discrepancy that makes you think there's been a billing error. I'm talking about 19 months of small, consistent withdrawals, cash, always under $2,000, always from different ATMs. always spaced far enough apart to avoid any automated flag. I went back through 2 years of statements and I found 41 transactions I could not account for. The total was somewhere between $60,000 and $65,000. I am a retired high school teacher. That is not a small amount of money to me. I sat there until it was dark outside. Then I did something I'd never done before in 19 years of marriage. I went into Sandra's desk in the spare bedroom, which she used as her home office for the bookkeeping work she took on after I retired, and I opened the bottom drawer. It was where she kept files. I'd seen her use that drawer 1,000 times. Client files, tax records, household documents. I knew what was supposed to be in there. In the back, behind a hanging folder labeled Insurance, I found a manila envelope that wasn't labeled anything at all. Inside were 3 items: a prepaid phone, not activated, still in its packaging, a handwritten list of dates going back to March of the previous year, and a photograph of Donna Farrell. Not a police photo, not a newspaper photo, a photograph taken from a distance, candid, of a woman walking through a parking lot. The kind of photo you take when you don't want the subject to know they're being photographed. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I closed the drawer. I went to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to understand what I was looking at. Here is what I understood. Sandra had known Donna Farrell. Sandra had been watching her. Sandra had, for reasons I didn't yet know, decided that the best way to end her marriage to me was not a divorce but a prison sentence. She had built a hidden room in my basement, or had it built sometime in the last few years, carefully, while I was busy being retired and trusting and oblivious. She had arranged for a woman to be in that room. She had registered a storage unit in my name. She had been draining our savings for a year and a half. And she had gone to Savannah, 400 miles away, to establish an alibi for whatever was about to happen. I want to tell you something, friends. Because some of you have been married a long time, and you know what it feels like to look at someone you have slept beside for nearly 2 decades and suddenly not recognize them. It is not anger, not at first. It is a kind of vertigo. The floor tilts. Every memory you have becomes a question you don't know how to answer. Every warm moment becomes a crime scene you need to re-examine. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, I went to give my formal statement to Detective Marsh. I told her everything. Not just what I knew about the room. I told her about the bank statements. I told her about the drawer. I told her about the prepaid phone, the dates list, the photograph. I told her about the combination to the lockbox and the conversation I'd had with Sandra 6 weeks ago. I told her about Sandra suggesting this particular week for her trip to Savannah. Marsh listened without interrupting. She made notes. When I finished, she looked at me across the table and said, "Mr. Hale, why didn't you bring the items from the drawer with you?" I told her I didn't take them because I wanted her to find them herself, in place, with no possibility that I had staged anything. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, and something changed in how she was looking at me. They drove to my house that afternoon. I stayed in the car. I watched 2 detectives go inside with a warrant. I watched them come back out 50 minutes later with evidence bags. Then Marsh made a phone call that I was not supposed to hear, but I did because the car window was cracked. She called someone in Savannah. Sandra was picked up at her sister's house that evening. She did not come home. She was interviewed at the Chatham County Sheriff's Office for 3 hours. She had an attorney on the phone within the first 20 minutes, which tells you something about how prepared she was for this possibility. But here is what Sandra had not prepared for. Donna Farrell was alive. Not only was Donna Farrell alive, but Donna Farrell was cooperative. She had not been kidnapped in any traditional sense. She had agreed, for money, to be in that room for a period of time, to make it look as though someone had held her there, and then to disappear to a cousin's house in Macon while the investigation ran its course. She had been told the room belonged to a man named Gerald Marsh. She did not know my name. She had never met me, and that it was part of a legal dispute involving property documentation. She had been misled about what she was participating in. When she understood the actual situation, she walked into the Bibb County Sheriff's Office on her own and gave a full statement. Sandra had paid her $12,000 in cash. 11 of those transactions I had found in our bank statements. The 12th was the one I hadn't been able to trace yet. Here is the motive. Because you deserve to know it, and because the original story I was living through never made it clear enough. Sandra had, for the past 3 years, been planning to leave. Not to divorce me. Divorce would mean splitting 17 years of jointly held assets, a house with substantial equity, retirement accounts, savings. She was 58 years old. She had been doing bookkeeping out of a spare bedroom for a decade, and she had decided that she wanted more than what a clean divorce would give her. She wanted the house outright. She wanted the savings outright. She wanted, in the clearest possible terms, to be rid of me in a way that left me with nothing, including my freedom. She had found Donna Farrell through a community board listing for odd jobs. She had spent 3 months establishing trust, building a story, explaining the legal dispute fiction. She had spent those same 3 months making sure the storage unit, the hidden room, the financial paper trail, all pointed to me as a man who had been hiding a secret life in his own basement. The plan was elegant in its awfulness. A missing woman found hidden in my house, a storage unit in my name near where the woman had last been seen. $60,000 of unexplained cash withdrawals that she would have explained, from Savannah, as money I had been hiding from her. I would have been arrested. She would have been the devastated wife. The house, the accounts, the life, all of it would have resolved in her direction while I sat in a county jail waiting for a trial that wouldn't have come for 2 years. She had been married to a history teacher for 19 years, and she forgot the oldest lesson history has. The plan that seems perfect always has a seam somewhere. Dale the plumber found hers. When the forensic team examined the hidden room, they found 2 sets of fingerprints. Mine were not among them. Sandra's were. On the doorframe, on the bolt, on the interior wall beside the cot where, apparently, she had steadied herself while checking on the room during the weeks before she left for Savannah. Her attorney told her what that meant. She knew. I was told, later, that she went very quiet when they showed her the print analysis. There was also the storage unit. The signature on the rental agreement was a reasonable approximation of mine, but it had been signed left-handed, and I am right-handed, a fact that my pension documents, my mortgage applications, and 17 years of birthday cards could confirm without difficulty. The charge was conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. There were additional charges related to the financial transfers. Her attorney negotiated. There will be a plea. I don't know the final number yet, and I have been told not to discuss it publicly, so I won't. What I can tell you is that I kept the house. I want to tell you something before I finish, because I am 63 years old, and I have learned enough to know that a story like this deserves more than just the legal outcome. My daughter Emma flew in from Denver the week after the arrest. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had sat making myself sandwiches I couldn't eat while the detectives worked downstairs, and she asked me if I was okay. Not in the way people ask when they don't want a real answer, in the way that meant she would sit there for as long as it took. I told her I didn't know yet. She said that was an honest answer. I've been sleeping in the house alone since then. I reattached the shelving unit to the basement wall, and I put a real light in that corner, and sometimes I go down there in the morning just to look at it. Not because I enjoy looking at it. Because I am a man who spent his career teaching young people that you don't understand history by looking away from it. You look straight at it, you ask what it means, you decide what you carry forward. What I carry forward is this: 19 years of my life were not a lie. Some of them were real. Some mornings were real. Some dinners were real. Some of the kindness was real, even if it was also, I now understand, strategic. You can grieve what was genuine even when you are furious at what was false. Those two things can exist at the same time in the same chest, and you don't have to resolve them. I do not need Sandra to apologize to me. I do not need her to explain herself further than the detectives already extracted. I don't need to watch her cry, or hear her tell me she didn't mean it, or convince myself that somewhere underneath all of it there was a woman who had once genuinely loved me and just lost her way. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. It doesn't change my morning. It doesn't change the house, or the light in the basement corner, or the coffee I make for one now instead of two. Emma called me last Sunday. She asked what I'd been doing. I told her I'd been outside. I built a raised garden bed along the south fence, something I had been saying I would do for years and never gotten around to. The dirt was good, the light was right. She laughed. She said it sounded like I was going to be okay. I told her that was probably an honest answer, too. I don't need the last word with Sandra. I don't need to understand every choice she made or trace every turn in the road that brought her to that plan. What I needed was the truth, and the truth came up through my own basement floor, found by a plumber who thought he was just fixing a leak on a Tuesday morning. The sink doesn't drip anymore. Dale did good work. Sometimes the most clarifying moments in life arrive through the most ordinary doors. A dripping sink, a Tuesday morning, a stranger doing his job. When everything false has been stripped away, what remains is yours. The house you kept, the garden you finally planted, the daughter who calls on Sunday just to hear your voice. Betrayal can hollow a man out, but it can also, quietly, hand him back to himself. A small note for you: this story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a moment of entertainment while leaving something worth carrying with you. The belief that even at 63, after the worst kind of surprise, a person can walk back outside and find the light is still falling right on the south fence.